I'm Dane Rose, and in this video I want to talk about the inevitability of conscious, sustainable fun, of beauty, truth, and goodness, of excellence and evolution. It's inevitable from a number of different perspectives that tie into geometry, mathematics, probability fields, and an evolutionary process. So let's look at a couple. Pain. Pain leads to awareness. Awareness leads to change. Change leads to less pain, and less pain leads to more beauty, truth, and goodness, more sustainable fun. Fear of pain leads to awareness, leads to change, leads to less pain and greater well-being. Whenever an individual enters a new environment, a new relationship that is just completely overwhelming and unfamiliar, a new job, a new love affair with someone we don't fully understand or that brings out some part in us that we don't understand, we enter it in the face of the child. The innocence, the naivete, the unknown, the trust in that unknown, the trust to enter what is an imperfect system. And in doing so, we experience through the lens of identity failure, surprise. We have the experience of being the victim. And being the victim does not repair itself, meaning the child point of view, the paradigm of the child is not ultimately sustainable. And so the pain of victimhood goes unanswered. And this leads to the birth of the adolescent, whereas the child is the open one, the naivete, the one that enters the system. The adolescent is the one who rebels, who goes into the antithesis, sympathy, antipathy, the rebellion, the reaction. I don't like this, I don't want this, everything is fucked up about this. The complete reactive rebellion against everything. And this creates identity. Because whereas the child merges with that which is, the adolescent defines itself in opposition to what is and creates a separate identity. Well, a separate identity is the first step in diversity, and nature is a diversity-creating machine. Nature throws out endless variance in the geometry of possibility fields, in the statistical probability of chance. It guarantees anomalies. And anomalies go both ways in a given environment. Meaning, if you have 100 anomalies, whatever it is, let's take a human being. One person has higher sensitivity of hearing. One person has lower sensitivity in hearing. Well, whatever the environment, that's a plus or a minus. If you are exposed to heavy machinery, horrible dynamite explosions at the nearby mine, then the greater hearing sensitivity becomes a source of distress. But if you're born into a family of musicians, the greater hearing sensitivity becomes a source of unusual pleasure and vice versa. If you're born into that mining situation or that heavy equipment operation with lower than normal hearing, you don't get upset with all the bangs and stuff the way a normal or a highly sensitive hearing person would. And so you get to relax more in your environment. So nature always creates diversity. And in any given environment, that variance is a plus or a minus. But because nature creates diversity in every environment, the diversity, the anomaly that has a benefit or a beneficial aspect in that environment grows and thrives in that environment. But nature also creates a vast probability field of environments, which means that nature creates endless variance within every person, and then it creates endless variance in environment, such that the very things that are making one person suffer in environment A are helping the similar type of person thrive in environment B. And what that means is that in some environment, every trait blossoms, and in some environment, every trait fails, which guarantees a diversity of individuality in the diversity of environment. And so nature is a winning machine, is a winning program that creates diversity upon diversity upon diversity, and then allows the relationships that synergize most intelligently, that deliver the most amount of sustainable well-being, beginning with life, for the least amount of energy. Those are the patterns, the identities that thrive in that environment. And because there are so many environments, we're talking with over 1 billion planets with life potential. Is it in our solar system alone? And so, it's, or is it our galaxy? It's an unfathomable amount of little spheres, all in different proximity to different things that predispose the possibility field of life to happen more in this way in this location on this planet, more in this way in this location on that planet, and more on every location. And then we have different histories and different races, each with predispositions that have blessings and curses that are neutral in the abstract, but positive or negative as we experience them in a given environment within a given value hierarchy. If you value pleasure, for example, then having excruciating amount of pain with sensitive ears next to a mine is a terrible disaster. If you value stoicism and growing through adversity, if you value the continuity of the planet or the interruption of the body, it's like, which is better? That cough just woke me up. It just broke the pattern. Which is it? Depends on the lens through which it's viewed. It just relaxed my shoulder muscles. But what was it? How do you view something? You have to put on a lens. And if your lens is the perfect professional video, then that was a catastrophe. If your lens is, let's see what the body has to say in a generally over-cerebral culture, this was a triumph. My body got a word in edgeways, and all of us benefited if we have the eyes to recognize it. Now, the adolescent, in its reactive extreme, in its antithesis, gives birth to an individual. But it is an individual in the mirror image, in the opposite of that which it is rebelling against. So, in that situation, in that antithesis, it also has a flaw, meaning the exact opposite of something that is flawed is also flawed. You can look at it in a mirror. You know, a mirror reverses things, right? So the adolescent rebels against whatever system has been unjust to the child, or what is then the inner child. The adolescent rebels against the unfairness, the hypocrisy, the inefficiency, the cruelty, the stupidity of the system in which the child entered. The romantic relationship, the job, the birth into a dysfunctional family. I'm never going to do this. I hate angry people. I don't want this. But of course, a mirror reverses everything, but it's almost identical. You can find in the adolescent rebellion the seeds of exactly what is being rebelled against, because it's a reaction. And the antithesis of something that doesn't work is something else that doesn't work in the opposite direction. You can think of it as the problem of two extremes. If 200 degrees below zero doesn't work, then 200 degrees above zero doesn't generally work either. And so it's a problem of extremes. And so the adolescent, thrust into the new world as a unique individual in the antithesis of the system in which they are defining themselves against, ultimately learns that there are just as many problems in the extreme rebellion as there are in what is there. It's one of the reasons that utopian experiments through the lens of antithesis, through the lens of adolescence, often are as sick and damaging as the sick and damaging cultures out of which they are rebelling against. And so this then moves into the synergy. So this is another phenomena within nature that guarantees success, life, diversity, evolution, and evolution towards what? Towards sustainable conscious well-being, towards sustainable, intelligent fun. And it's the process of synergy, that whenever two or more are gathered, an interference pattern emerges that is greater than the sum of its parts. Whenever two or more are gathered, two objects, a plant and some soil, a battery and a light bulb, whenever two or more things are in proximity, two individuals, a probability field emerges, mathematically speaking, that is greater than the probability field of either of the objects or people alone. So what we're saying here is that this finger has a probability field, and this finger has a probability field. And when these two fingers interact, they have a probability field. And what we're saying is that the principle of synergy is such that the probability field that emerges out of the they is bigger then the two probability fields combined as individuals. So if we say that, let's just say, for example, that this finger has 1,000,000 possibilities, and of those 1,000,000 possibilities, it has 100,000 probabilities. Meaning, if you look at all the probable things that this finger is going to do, you can come up with 100,000 things. It could turn left, it could turn more, it could go up, could go down, could be dipped in water, could be dipped in honey, could be dipped in a lot of honey. It has a probability field as a finger. And this has a probability field that's frankly quite similar to the probability field. But when you combine these in relationship, the probability field is not just 200,000 items. It's larger. So the principle of synergy is that the probability field of two things in relationship with one another is greater than the combined probability field of two things in isolation. This is one of the reasons why marriage or family or culture is such an intelligent emergence. The probability field of one human being alone without contact with its species, well, first of all, that doesn't exist, right? Because each individual is the synergy of two or more individuals that helped to give birth to that individual. But let's say that at birth, you put a child, well, first of all, they die, of course. That's not a very good probability field. If you put a one-day-old infant out in almost any environment without any help of people, anywhere on the planet, it's very likely to die. So not a very big probability field at all. But let's say that you kept the body alive in some way. Maybe you had a robot feed some milk. Well, the probability field isn't very good either, because orphans that didn't get touched often develop all kinds of neuroses and this and that. And then it wouldn't develop language. And without language, it wouldn't have the ability to think. Without the ability to think, it wouldn't have self-awareness. It wouldn't have the ability to differentiate itself consciously from other things. That requires thought, which requires language. At least our kind of awareness. You and I cannot think a single thought without language, which means that the form of consciousness that you and I are both most familiar with is dependent on language. And one individual would not develop English, Japanese, Korean, Thai, or any other language, because there would be no one else to talk to. And if there was a heavy object that the person could not move on their own, it wouldn't get moved, because there'd be no one else to help. There would be no buy with one click, no free at-home delivery, no Indian takeout. The probability field of that individual would be vastly smaller than the probability field of an individual in a family that's connected through language and a certain amount of freedom with the rest of the world, with mobility, the ability to get into a plane and go here, or go here, or go here. That probability field depends on the synergies inherent in being a conscious species with language. Meaning there are no planes without multiple people. Because there's no iron without multiple people. There's no steel without multiple people. There's no mill to mill iron and steel. There are no shipping containers without multiple people. There are no vehicles. There's no jewelry. Dyed clothing, you don't have time for that as one individual. If you can even think about it, you don't even care what you look like. Mirrors don't exist unless millions upon millions, if not billions upon billions, of people did not collaborate synergistically to create the shipping business, the clothing business, the idea of business, cash, credit cards, language, hairdressers, restaurants, transportation vehicles of all kinds, that expand your and my probability fields exponentially on the synergy of other people. So in order to have synergy, you must have distinction, because it's two or more distinct patterns of energy, two or more distinct people that are capable of generating synergy. And what the child with its unconditional yes and the adolescent with its reactive rebellion produce are two distinct parts of the self, neither of which are terribly sustainable and useful. The one is an automatic yes, the other is an automatic no. The one is white, the other is black. You've got two extremes. But then a synergy forms, and it's called the adult. A magical synergy emerges out of the extreme child and the extreme adolescent. That is a unique fusion that has never existed before. It's a self-identity, because the child is defined completely by its environment. The adolescent is completely defined with its antithesis to the environment. And if you have not rebelled, if you've not seen the shadow side of your parents, of your teachers, of your government, of your system, of your language, of your paradigm, of your guru, of your religion, of your monetary system, if you have not seen the shadow side and rebelled and said, this is full of shit, I don't want any part of this. If you have not done that in the extreme, you lack the polarity necessary to give birth to something original. Now, that may be fine with parents holding an abuse contract. Every child has an abusive contract with the authority structures around them to survive. And that contract serves the status quo. It doesn't serve life, though. To serve life, one must create a uniquely new pattern. Because out of every uniquely new pattern, synergies erupt spontaneously and mathematically at an exponential rate. What I mean is that if you look at the mathematics and geometry of a 12-person, let's say a 5-person group, right? 5 people in a group. Well, the law of synergy says it's not 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, 4 unit, 5 unit. The law of synergy says it's 25, it's multiples. So the probability field in a group of 5 is 5 times 5, minimum. 5 times 5 negative, 5 times 5 positive, depending on the view through which one looks, one's paradigm, one's values. The probability field in both directions, taking you towards your values and away from your values, expands exponentially, geometrically, as you go from a group of 1 to a group of 5. We're dealing now with 25 is the number of the probability field. Now, when you add a sixth person to that list, you're not adding one unit to the person or to the group. Now it's 30. Six times 6 now. That one person adds 11 units. 6 times 6 is 36. 5 times 5 is 25. You see, if there was just one person and you add another person, 1 plus 1, 1 times 1, it's not as big. But the bigger the group, when you add one unique person, a distinct person to that group, the bigger the group, the bigger the impact of one uniquely new pattern. Now, that impact can be positive, negative, or both. It depends on the lens through which one looks. Eckhart Tolle just talked in answer to a question about how do you feel about and deal with unconscious people. And when you look through the eyes of a martyr, of a victim, I'm conscious. Why do I have to deal with these unconscious people? It's so unfair. Why couldn't they be conscious like me? Why do I have to do all the work? Burdens of a child, the outrage of the adolescent, the rebellion, the self-pity, the self-importance. But when you look through the adult, there is no garbage. There is no accident. The universe is. And if you look at the universe as an adult, as a friendly place, then those unconscious people are the things that build the muscle of your consciousness. Because the easiest thing to do around an unconscious person is to react, which is an adolescent, which is unconscious. Meaning when someone is incredibly stupid, the easiest thing to do is to lament their stupidity, which is an antithesis, which is the opposite, but there's nothing new and conscious about it, so it is equally stupid. It is as stupid to be stupid as it is to lament someone else's stupidity, as to rebel or, gripe about other people's stupidity. So it's easy to do the antithesis, and it's easy to agree. The more power an entity has, the easier it is to conform and agree. You're around a very wealthy, famous, well-connected person. They make an off-taste joke, say something completely insane. Well, mostly, if you confront someone and say, that doesn't make any sense, I don't like your taste there, mostly in our culture, you get disowned, punished, disconnected, not invited to the next party. So when there's a lot of power, there's a lot of conformity. That's the child. At some point in the process of being the child, however, the unfairness, the injustice, the hypocrisy, etc., gets too much. Then you have the adolescent. I hate those famous people, those bastards always throwing their weight around, horrible rich people, miserable assholes, hypocrites, just in it for this, and all those other people like I used to be. Sucking up to them, I hate them too. The hypocrites. They're not spiritual like me. I will have nothing to do with them now that I'm not invited. I don't want anything to do with it. It's two polarities. It's equally unconscious, the child, the adolescent. Equally unconscious. And nothing new emerges. So you have an equal level of stupidity to react reactively to stupidity. It's not much difference. Unconsciousness, antithesis, they're both asleep. And neither of them are particularly useful. The world's full of shit. The world's perfect. They're not particularly useful in growing and evolving in nature's game. So the adult forms out of those two polarities a tempered, uniquely new formation that is impossible without them, right? So both the child and the adolescent are problematic to living a great life. But you could not be an individual capable of being a unique individual without the palette, the extreme black and the extreme white to create the color, to create the grayscale, out of which your life emerges. Extreme heat, extreme cold, if they didn't exist, you couldn't find the sweet spot of your body. So, inevitability. The adult is an inevitable emergence. If it happens in a lifetime, now some people stay a child their entire life. It's too dangerous to rebel against a powerful figure who punishes anyone that disagrees with them. It's too dangerous, so you stay a child your whole life. You never become a unique, conscious individual. Or you manage to pull out of the orbit, the gravitational pull of the child, the payoffs and benefits of being an agreeable child, willing to assign abuse contracts and survival contracts with the people around you. You take care of me and I'll do this and this and this. You become an adolescent. And I want no part of the world. It's fucked up. Living in cities, morons. Money, losers. It's not spiritual. Things, so materialistic. I don't want anything to do with anyone or anything. The whole thing is fucked up. If I have to, I'll eat something, but that was fucked up too. I don't even like myself because now I just colluded with the enemy. It's terrible. Well, you die an adolescent. But if you can experience the healthy extreme in being witnessed and held in a container of culture, in a container of family, in a container of relationship, then the adolescent creates the antithesis of the child out of which we can grow up, out of which we can form a unique relationship with all that is, that did not and could not exist without our presence as adults. And adults are more successful than child or adolescent. Adults have more fun than child or adolescent. That may not seem that way because we don't know what an adult is for the most part. Having 2.5 kids and 2 cars and an expensive mortgage and smoking cigars is not an adult. It's conformity. An adult looks through the unique lens of both parents and both parental histories and multiple cultures, which emerged out of other cultures in a unique environment with a unique body, and sees the world in a new way and lives in that world in a new way. And that new way, the synergy of the adult, is greater than either of the two parents that gave birth to first the child, then the adolescent, and now the adult. The adult has a bigger probability field than either of the two parents. It doesn't mean their actuality will live up to that, particularly if they don't become an adult. But if they navigate life's map from sympathy, antipathy to synthesis, that synthesis has a bigger mathematical probability field, statistically speaking, than either of the two parents as individuals. And then when they meet someone else who has a higher statistical probability field from their two parents, life becomes more complex. And with complexity comes consciousness. And with consciousness comes intimacy and stabilizes complexity. And with complexity comes higher levels of intelligence. Intelligence that can be measured by the efficiency with which energy becomes sustainable well-being. In other words, the maturation process of a human being, from child to adolescent to adult, guarantees evolution, guarantees life's winning. Just one more vector of success. Death, first of all, is not death. Physicists know that no energy is created or destroyed. Rather, it takes different forms. All energy is recycled. Now, what happens in the recycle process of death? Well, first of all death equals new life. Take the death of a human being. If we take the typical life-designed organic pattern, an individual who dies, let's say you lay them under a tree in a hole 3 feet deep. Well, the blood seeps out, nitrogen fertilizes the roots, the tree becomes more healthy, and the tree gives off more oxygen and has more successful offspring. And the oxygen feeds the human beings that lived. Well, if you look at it from the perspective of the individual identity, death is a tragedy because it's no more of me. If you look at death from the perspective of life, it's wonderful. Death is fantastic because what death means is that that particular pattern of energy was unsuccessful at sustaining itself past that point in time, either by old age, by being shot, by getting sick. And other life forms that are more successful at maintaining themselves at that moment in time have more resources. Now, you can look at this as a creator or business innovator. If you're an entrepreneur and you love being an entrepreneur, first of all, you're a friend and know failure generally quite well. Most entrepreneurs fail several times before they hit it big in any meaningful way, and that's a statistical reality. And so let's say you invest, you're an angel investor, you invest in 10 different businesses. Well, you expect, knowing the statistics of new businesses, that 90% of them fail. You expect 9 of them to fail. And this allows you to focus on the 10% that take off amazingly and give back all the energy captured by the other 9 failures. So if you're an investor, well, first of all, you can't be all things to all people. And so you give 100,000 to this company, 100,000 to all 10 companies. And this one fails. Now you've got more energy to give to the other 9. And the next one fails. You've got more energy to give to the other 8, etc. What you're left with in the end is often what's dreamed about by angel investors, a unicorn, a billion-dollar company, a company that just takes off, a Google, a Twitter, a Tesla, right? And it takes off. And you've got time and energy to put into that successful, intelligent form of life, that pattern of life. And you start 10 friendships. And this one doesn't return phone calls, and this one always likes to drag the energy down, and this one never shows up on time or does their commitments, and this one gets overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, this and that, in a culture that doesn't teach the art of friendship. Oh, I don't know what to do. And one of them knows how to be a friend. Well, for life to blossom and grow in the direction of sustainable, fun, and intelligent, the other 9 need to die so that the one can become all that it can be. There is a certain amount of boundary in individuality. A hose bib puts out a certain amount of water at a given house per minute, at a certain pressure. And if you fan that water out, then you have little drops falling on a lot of places. But if you concentrate that water, it makes a big impact in one place. So death leads to concentration. Imminent death often helps us really be present in the moment. Death is our friend in so many ways. Then there's the fact that energy is not destroyed in death. What happens to the consciousness? Does it blossom, set free of the prism and prison of 5 little holes out into the world? A good way to look at our self is a multidimensional energy interconnected infinitely with all of the energy out there. And in order to create this very limited, very narrow dimensional experience and do so in the illusion of lineal time, we cover up 99% of all of that connectivity. And then once we're completely isolated and in the dark, we punch 5 little holes into that tarp, into that bundle of partition. And those little holes that we cut into that are the 5 senses. And suddenly we can see a little bit of reality through those little holes out into reality. Now, when the body lifts away, there's nothing blocking the self from sensing and seeing what was obscured by the body. Death is a friend. Life is a practice. Now, if we understand that the most intelligent patterns win, statistically speaking. Now, I say the exact opposite in some other areas where I point out that the law of mass and the law of intelligence are in opposition in cultural dynamics. That the most intelligent people in any field are by definition a very small minority. And that in many cultural environments, the majority bullies the minority, not because of intelligence, but by superior mass, the law of the bully. That 5 people ganging up on one person usually win, even if the one person is nicer, smarter, happier, does better meditation. Statistically speaking, if a whole culture gangs up on a race or a minority of some form, the law of mass wins and crushes the fragile new pattern that is more intelligent than the status quo. But it's also the case that a highly intelligent minority understands this and can dance and put on masks to be part of the majority and part of the minority. So the most intelligent intelligence tends to outperform the least intelligent. And since the underlying drive of all life is to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse, the evolution of intelligence generally includes self-preservation, which begins to spread a more intelligent meme, because every single person is viral in nature. Every single person is viral in nature. So if you develop a superior technology and have the intelligence to present it in the language of the majority. For example, America loves efficiency. It's not intelligent to love efficiency more than sustainability, more than great relationships. But Americans love efficiency anyway. Many Americans feel much better doing the wrong thing efficiently, meaning something that does not substantially aid their well-being, efficiently, productively, than they do doing an intelligent thing, a more intelligent thing, inefficiently. Like building a temple without really knowing the skills of exactly how to do that, but making a go at it. Starting a new friend and figuring it out inefficiently. In an emotionally illiterate, traumatically illiterate, relationally illiterate, chauvinistic culture, relationships are going to be very hard because you don't know what you're doing and you're relating to someone else who doesn't know what they're doing either because they're from the same cult you are. It's incredibly inefficient. But it may be more intelligent to begin and start learning to create a sustainable friendship with one human being inefficiently. What would be efficient would be to study it in high school and middle school and start measuring quality of relationships and teaching requests and boundary statements and negotiations and win-win assessments and ethics and the whole thing. That would be intelligent and efficient. That would be even more intelligent. But if you're born into a relationally illiterate culture, it may still be more intelligent to inefficiently learn how to be a good friend than to efficiently learn how to cut down more trees or apply more Roundup. So, if you're in a culture that worships efficiency, you can present your technology. All intelligence has a connection to efficiency. Intelligence is efficiency. It's just focused efficiency. It is an efficiency of sustainable, felt well-being. The efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable, multidimensional well-being is the measure of intelligence. It's just that applying more Roundup so that you can poison more fields per person faster and deteriorate the quality of microactive life in your soil more rapidly does not lead to more felt, sustainable well-being over time. So, one can present a new technology in the language, intelligent or otherwise, of one's cult, of one's status quo. And in doing so, that which dies frees up energy to take a new formation more predisposed to life. And there are many human beings in our culture that in dying, even though it seems like a tragedy, if their bodies nurture a tree, on many metrics, a tree is more predisposed to sustainable well-being than the minds fed by the bodies and cults of many of our people. Death is not death, it is change. And what dies is that which is least efficient at bringing sustainable well-being. You look at sociopathic behavior, which leads to pain, which leads to awareness, which expands language, which, if followed scientifically, leads us inevitably to the sociopathic environment that produced the sociopathic state within an individual. The holographic law, the fractal pattern law, says that a culture that creates sociopathic people contains sociopathic elements. And since pain isn't any fun and ripples outwards, over time, an intelligent culture that produces children smarter than the parents, an intelligent culture that produces children through the law of synergy that are smarter with higher probability fields than the parents, over time leads to a more empathic culture that leads to more empathic brains, that lead to more empathic human beings and behavior, that in turn leads to a more and more empathic world, which in turn gives birth to the transcendent environment, that gives birth to the transcendent brain, that leads to more and more behavior that honors and acknowledges the self that is larger than the individual ego into which we are all connected, which leads higher on the point of intelligence, the efficiency with which energy is transformed into human well-being, which leads higher towards grace. Dislike out there. I don't like you. I don't like the way Trump does this. I hate this. I like it. The fractal nature of reality says that that which is out there is in here. That if we belong to a set in which something is happening out there, we belong to a set in which it is mirrored in here. Even if the mirror is as simple as hating hateful things. Hate is the most hateful thing there is, by definition. We're not judging anyone for hating. We're just saying nothing is more hateful than hate. It's the definition of hate. So if you hate hateful things, you are at least as connected with hate as the hateful thing that you hate. Now, if we understand this paradigm which emerges with time, meaning understanding this paradigm leads to a more graceful reality than the schizophrenia in dissociative trauma that is created by not understanding this paradigm. In other words, this is a more intelligent paradigm than the paradigm in which we have an illusion of disintegration and dissociation. So if we understand this paradigm, that that which I dislike out there, I dislike in here, then other people are wonderful educators. Trump is doing an amazing job of teaching me what I hate about myself. It's the same energy, just expressed in a different part of the possibility field. And thank you for teaching me what I don't accept in myself, in my past, in my probability, in my humanity. My possibility field. I could be that way. If I was born into this environment in that way and this and that and this happened, that's how part of me emerges. And what a teacher of the high cost of childhood abuse and narcissistic parents, incapable of emotional literacy, incapable of loving without domination. How informative Fred Trump is on the importance of parenting, which can lead to a stunning awareness. Maybe we ought to spend more time teaching teenagers how to be great parents than teaching them algebra that they're not going to use a day in their life. Worth a shot? What is the probability field that emerges? If it leads to more sustainable well-being, as I believe it's obvious that it would, we've just taken a step of intelligence, courtesy of Fred Trump. If all we do is hate him, we haven't even grasped that we are our biggest enemy, hate being closer to hate than any hateful thing. When we cannot forgive something, we become it. Oh, I can't stand those people. They're all focused on sex. I can't stand it. They're always just focusing on sex. Why can't they grow up? Why can't they do this? I hate them. I never forgive them. How could they do this? How could they do that? Bastards hurt me. I can't forgive them. It's unforgivable. Well, the pattern of not forgiving something is a pattern of denying a part of ourselves that exists in the possibility field. Because in the smallest sense of self, we are the actuality. A little bit larger, we are our probability field. I could be that way, and I can see that, but I'm not. I could have done that, but I didn't. We still own it. It's part of us. The largest self is the possibility field. It is possible. I could be president. I could embezzle money. I could rape children. It's possible. Well, when we refuse to forgive, we disown, dislove, reject, and deny a part of our possibility field. We don't love it. We don't understand it. We suppress it. We deny it. We judge it. We numb it. We attack it. We project on it. Every single one of those actions grows that energy. Meaning if you take any energy, judge it, deny it, hate it, suppress it, refuse to engage with it, refuse to love it, and project hatred on it, that energy will deteriorate under the influence of that energy. That will happen out there and it will happen in here. In other words, what we refuse to forgive, we create. Now this is a wonderful piece of news. Meaning, if you were molested by your parents, which a surprisingly large group of people in an emotionally and relationally illiterate culture are sexually abused by older family members or friends of family. In fact, if the statistics were listened to rather than the dogma of fear, they would say, don't talk to family. They're dangerous. Go talk to strangers. Statistically, a stranger will do less damage to you than your own family. If you add up who are the people who beat their children, rape their children, betray their children, steal from their children, traumatize their children, you'll find that 85% of the time it is a family or close family associate. So if you really care about children, the science is clear. Get out of your town. Leave your family as soon as you possibly can and hang out with strangers, because you've only got a 15% odds, statistically speaking, of that happening over there. That is a little tongue-in-cheek because some of this is self-perpetuating. You know, when adults constantly warn children not to spend time with strangers, they often spend very little time with strangers, so they don't have much time to abuse them. It doesn't really matter that much where you are in an abusive cult, in an ignorant, shame-based cult. You're going to be abused at home or out in the world, or you're going to abuse yourself until you learn a superior technology than the one that's been modeled by the majority of the people around you. It's just common sense. But if you cannot forgive part of the possibility field of yourself in which you reside, all of us reside in the actual point surrounded by a vast possibility field. And the actual energy is the most dense, then less dense is the probable energy, and then less dense is the possible energy. When we refuse to forgive, we are also refusing to give that which is needed in that energy for it to grow. Now, that which is unforgiven doesn't vanish as a general rule. it deteriorates. It's much like a garden, right? Let's say that one plant offended you in your garden. Just didn't produce the quality of tomatoes you were demanding of that plant. Well, you tell the plant, unless you produce the quality of tomato that I'm expecting, I'm not going to give you any water. I'm going to pour salt on you. I'm going to hate you. I'm going to villainize you. And I will not give up until you produce the quality of tomato I desire. Well, how does that work? Stop watering the plant, starts wilting, put some salt on it, dies. Maybe some of the other plants give some water leaching in from the sides. You say, stop! This is an embargo. Anyone caught giving water, it's them or me. Now, if you want to get water and not have salt on your plants, you will not give any of your nutrients to that tomato. Well, 10 years later, is there going to be a healthier tomato or not? Now, if you respond as an adult, meaning if you know anything about science, you don't traumatize your tomato, refuse to give it water because it didn't do what you told it to do. You see if there's a deficiency in the soil. You take responsibility. Meaning you don't punish yourself. That's not responding intelligently. But you understand that every tomato plant wants to produce the best, healthiest tomato plant that there is. That's given. That's life's rule. You understand that. You trust that. And you decide to partner with that tomato plant. Do you need more iron? Do you need more trace minerals? Do you need less salt? Do you need more water? Do you need less salt water? Do you need more sun? Do you need more shade? Do you need more heat? Do you need more cold? We're going to work together. And I'm going to love you more until, voila, you produce the quality of tomatoes that we both want. Now, people are a little bit more tricky than this. Psychology is archaeological, meaning when an infant is born, the most fundamental thing they need initially is to know that they exist. The need to know that one exists is more fundamental in psychology than if one exists good or bad or bright or red or yellow. I exist. And the only way that you know if you exist is if you have impact. So a lot of what childhood is all about is figuring out how to have as much impact as possible, screaming, kicking, trying to figure out, I want to know that I exist. That's number one. Now, the next psychological need is for control. Without agency, without authority, without power, existence is despair, it's helplessness, it's suffocation, it's imprisonment, it's dependency. So the movement is towards control. As soon as you know that you exist, the next thing you work on is figuring out how to control what it is that exists. Now, there's a problem in this in dysfunctional families and sociopathic environments. In sociopathic environments, if someone is happy, someone in the environment tries to sabotage the happiness or exploit it. And so the happiness dissipates. And for an infant or a child, they're smaller than the culture and family around them. So they're constantly victimized. A child that's happily playing and singing, a sibling looks over, they don't like the fact that their sibling is enjoying themselves. They're not enjoying themselves. Their parents aren't enjoying themselves. Who's their sibling enjoying themselves? So they take a rock, or they get a bucket of ice, or they see the toy. They try and figure out, what is it that's making that person so happy? I want that, right? They go over and take it. Well, the infant immediately loses their sense of joy and happiness. And they feel helpless. They don't have any control. Because as soon as they get the toy back and are happy, someone else steals it, or someone else, maybe one of their brothers, told the parents that they stole the chocolate when, in fact, the brother did, right? So then the parent comes in, lacks sophistication, doesn't know their children very well. What do you expect in a relationally illiterate culture? Hits the child, joy and innocence shattered. Joy is very fragile. It's shattered in a moment. And it's a lot depends on the environment. It's hard to be peaceful when your mother's being raped or beaten or this, that. Now, the child's primary need at this point, first to exist, then to feel in control. Well, when you discover that positive emotions are largely dependent on the environment and fragile, the need for control suggests that what you have control over are negative states. And here's how it works. Child gets happy, gets knocked down. Child gets happy again, gets knocked down. Child gets happy again, gets knocked down, feels out of control, feels despair, etc. Then they decide to hang on to the feeling shitty. Brother makes them angry by stealing their things. But after this yo-yoing effect and feeling no agency, the child decides they're not going to forget the injustice and the outrage of their siblings. They're not going to do it. So they stay angry. So they don't go up and they don't get knocked down, and they discover they're in control of a negative state. They can hang on to a victim identity. They can hang on to an anger identity. They can hate. The mom says, "Would you like to have some ice cream?" "No, I'm not hungry. I'm busy hating." What I'm busy doing is holding on to my own state so that I feel that I control my own life. Now, the cost is a wound identity, a traumatized identity. That's the cost. But I know that I matter, and now I know I'm in control. These two needs come before the need to feel good. So the sequence of evolution of emotional states is sympathy, antipathy, synthesis, child, adolescent, adult. It's also know that I matter, have control over my own state, however miserable. See, and this is one of the reasons that trauma survivors get caught in such dark loops. It kind of goes like this. I'm going through my village, happily going along. 5 guys who look like any other guys walk up to me. I have no reason to be afraid. It's 5 in the afternoon. I don't know these people. And suddenly, a chloroform rag gets put over my face. Next thing I know, I'm being dragged. I wake up and I'm being raped in a forest. I scream for help. No help comes. I try and wrest free, but I'm not strong enough to fight 5 guys. I beg for mercy. They laugh. I am reduced into an awareness of complete and utter helplessness, and I feel hatred, and I feel rage, and I feel self-contempt. I hate the helpless part in me. This is a state that is so big it becomes timeless. To understand how time works, you have to have perspective. Without perspective, there's no time. What gives perspective is distance. So you can tell that time exists because you're comparing one thing to another. This was here, then it was here. But how do you tell movement when it's so close? So you can still tell there's a little bit of distinction, because what happens is the camera gets off base if I fully cover the lens. But when you're what's called flooded, all time disappears. There's no perspective. There's no sense of it'll be all over. It is your entire experience. You have an intensity level that is so loud, you lose any sense of the witness, and it is more than you can take. Now, in fact, there is time. The rape finishes, and you have a memory of a state of being that your ego cannot deal with, because it is timeless, overwhelming, out of your control, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, there's a problem for consciousness to solve, because your first drive is to exist, and your second drive is to have agency. And what 5 men have done to you in 2 hours is they have shown you that you are not safe, that you have no agency, that there is no way you can be completely protected. They have shown you that with the clear logic. What if they had knocked on the door? I don't have a chain on my door. I'm not expecting 5 men to be standing outside my front door. And I don't have a backup plan. What if they discover where I live? What if they rape me tomorrow night? And it's not the rape that is the problem. The STDs, the physical this, that baby. It's the blasting away of agency. It is the loss of control of your own state, because no one can face timeless helplessness without major psychological damage, because it is bigger than the ego, which means you need help in a culture that doesn't know how to help you. In a culture that does know how to raise people who will traumatize you again and again and again. So it's not over for 2 reasons. Your number 1 equation is to exist. You've still got that. Next is to have control and agency. You can't move to another country. It's unknown. You can't trust the unknown because you didn't see this coming. If you had seen this coming, you would have made another choice. So what does it reveal? It reveals that you can't see everything coming, which reveals that you can't trust yourself to see everything coming, which means that every single time you breathe, every single time you go into the next room, walk outside, apply for a job, you could be going into the unknown where this happens again. And anyone who has been traumatized and devastated to that extent has one goal for the rest of their life. It's a bottom line. I never, ever want to feel that way again. I cannot survive. My identity, the pattern of energy that I say is me, my thoughts, my feelings, my words, My actions cannot survive trauma intact. And when my identity crumbles and I acknowledge the truth that I am a dramatically different person because 5 people chose to do something for 2 hours that I had no control over, when I grasp that reality, I cannot solve the basic need for agency other than to kill myself, and some do. See, suicide solves the problem very nicely. 5 men are never going to rape me again because I'll be dead. Wonderful. It's a terrific solution. And in a dysfunctional abuse cult that is trauma and relationally illiterate, that is the best solution for some people. I can't stop my lover raping me. I can't stop my dad raping me. I can't stop 5 guys raping me. Oh, yes, I can. 1 bullet to the head, and now I've got agency. I've put a stop to it. I've solved the second problem, which trauma unravels, which is a sense of control. Because there is a mathematical reason why control comes before pleasure, for example. Why would a teenager spend energy to sulk? You can offer a teenager who's sulking to go see their favorite band. And if they're really in that stage of proving that no one can shake them, I'm not interested. I don't like eating my favorite ice cream. Take it or leave it. Fuck you. I've got control over my life. None of your yo-yoing. You're not going to suck me in. I'm not going to get all giddy and then have you start yammering about my homework and knock me down again. Fuck you, you son of a bitch. You've taken me up and down 10,000 times. Made me feel small. Made me feel helpless. You fucking coward. You fucking pervert. That's how you get your hit, knocking me up and knocking me down and knocking me up to prove that you've got some little shred of control of my life because you can't control your own? No. I'm disgusted with you. I hate you. You're a despicable disgrace of a human being. You're a miserable parent. I hate you. I wish I'd never been born into this wretched house. And you're not getting me out of this state with a fucking strawberry ice cream. Go fuck yourself. I'm going to hold on to my state of misery, disappointment, bitterness, cynicism. And you'll give me ammunition to help hold on to this identity sooner or later. You'll tell another lie. You'll get bored of trying to bribe me. Or maybe I'll take your bribe if I don't have to change my state. Fine, I'll take the strawberry ice cream. You're not going to get a thank you? I'm not going to change my state, at least in public. Maybe when I'm in my room or something else, I'll relax and say, aren't I smart? I pulled one over onto them, but you're not going to see me happy. I'm going to learn the poker face. I'm going to hold on to my identity and no one's going to budge it. There's a really important reason for that, which is that until you have agency, until you have mastery of your own state, until you have that, you can't begin to grow. You've got to seize the wheel. If you are completely reactive to your environment for the rest of your life, you're not an individual. You're just a reactive chemical. There's no consciousness there. And the possibility field that consciousness opens up is so vast compared to the possibility field of unconsciousness. Because unconsciousness is just complete and utter permanent reactivity. Complete, utter, permanent reactivity. Do you think clothing decides not to get wet when it's in the washing machine? Or wood decides not to burn? No. Wood reacts to fire by burning. Things react to water by getting wet. It's a human that says, I don't want to be wet, I won't go near the water, I'll build a roof, right? The possibility field of consciousness is so vast relative to reactivity that one must arrest the cycle of reactivity and become conscious in order to access that possibility field. And if that means starting in negative terrain, so be it. I will prove that no one can knock me off of my despair. Now, once you've gotten that down, if you really know how to be miserable when you're having sex, when your favorite TV, if you know how to be miserable no matter what, you're learning agency, which is more important than whether it's positive or negative agency at this stage. Because until you have agency, you're just reactive. So, in a dysfunctional home and culture, people learn agency on negative terrain because it's the only thing they have control over. Because it's more dense. It's easier to hang on to anger just by remembering that horrible, unfair event. You get angry again. You held on to it. But when you remember joy, you also remember the moment that took it away. And that tends to remind us of helplessness, which lowers state. So my point is, many, many, many people in a shame-based, traumatized cult, our culture, have not gotten over their trauma and have not fully established agency and are therefore determined to hold on to a less than optimal state and not let anyone influence them because they're still at, I can control my own life, God damn it, even if it makes me miserable. I will kill my body with endless cigarettes. See if you can stop me. I will drink myself to death. I will dote on my worst memories over and over again. You just try and stop me. I will remember your faults endlessly for the next 10 years and get all outraged at every betrayal. Just try and stop me, right? Because I'm still trying to hold on to state because I can't even begin to create joy with sustainability and grace. That requires synergy. That requires a group effort to a certain extent. If you have 100 monks who are praying, and one monk gets out a gun and starts shooting up the church and fellow monks, all 99 monks go into a panic, generally speaking. So there's an asymmetry. It's much easier to bring someone into terror if you whip out a gun or rape a child in front of people or do something that terrifies people because it causes pain. All fear, it correlates to pain. So if you do something that causes enormous amounts of pain or could cause enormous amounts of pain, it tends to fixate the brain. The reptilian brain, which is 5 times older and louder than the empathic brain, pipes up and says, you're in reptile territory, wake up or you're going to be dead. And that message comes in loud and hard. One criticism just blasts your state. You get 5 compliments. Oh, isn't that great? Oh, isn't that great? And one person says, you piece of shit. You fucked up, miserable excuse for a human being. You dwell on that for days. the brain amplifies the negative, in part because it's trying to get over our fragility of impact and find agency again. I should have said this, or next time I'm going to do it. But what if this is, and until we can solve it in some way where we feel like we can have agency, we dwell on these negative places. Well, if you're in a culture with people that are determined to hang on to negative states come hell or high water, and you try and change that, their win is to prove that you have no impact. If you give them a nice gift, their goal is to show that your gift didn't matter. If you try and love them, their goal is to say that your love isn't important. You can't make me happy. I'm going to be miserable no matter what. That's a state of development. Now, in a psychologically illiterate culture where we do not understand where we are on our own states of development, let alone where everyone else is, and you try and give something to someone, and they're in that state of development where no matter what you do, it's not going to make a difference. You feel small. Your loving state feels meaningless. So how do you respond? Well, you got to respond by stopping trying to make them feel loving. It's one of the reasons why negativity often blossoms. You know, you'll go to a partner and you'll try and give something nice to them or something, and they're like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm busy in my long list of grievances. It's like, honey, I just gave you flowers, I did this and that. I don't matter. I don't exist. I feel disappointed. I felt great a minute ago because I thought you'd enjoy my gift. Now I feel terrible. Fine. You don't like my gift? I'm taking it back. I'm not going to see your parents this Wednesday either. Well, suddenly they're out of their dream, right? What? You're not going to see my parents on Wednesday? Do you have to see my parents? No, I'm not going to. Oh, but you need to. I exist. So I do exist. I just don't exist when I'm doing something nice to you. I exist when I'm hurting you. Fine. I need to exist. I will hurt you. Please. Well, you're going to be nice to me? You're going to pay some attention to my nice flowers? Fine. I'll go and see your parents. Don't you dare pretend I don't exist, or I'll sleep with your best friend. That'll make a difference. In all your malaise, it'll make a dent in pretending that I mean nothing to you. Oh. To watch you squirm over that one. So this need to exist is primary. The need for agency is secondary. The need to feel good is the next step in this process. And there are a lot of people and a lot of us, a lot of the time, that are more focused on getting control over something than anything positive and intelligent. But we need to understand that that's part of life. Because once they get in control, they become an individual. Once they become an individual, then they try and see how much they can manage their state. If they can feel in control of a somewhat positive state with a little bit of cynicism in reserve, they'll give it a try. If nobody knocks them out of their somewhat positive state, they'll consider they can safely be somewhat positive. But if they say, wow, this is so much fun being somewhat positive, let me be incredibly excited and happy and trusting and beautiful and extraordinary. Let's do that. And then suddenly they're judged. Who do they think they are? And then the judgment hurts, and now they don't feel so extraordinary anymore. And they feel, I can't do it. I can't hold that positive state. You fuckers, take it away from me. You bastards. Oh, I can hang on to that. You fucking bastards. I was having one day of enjoying myself. Is that too much to ask? Oh, I'm going to seethe on this for a year and try and knock me out of this. I'm holding on to control. I've got agency. But that whole agency process is building muscle. Feels miserable controlling all this, but you build muscle. You're learning the levers, because once you learn how to have misery, no matter how great your environment is, you can eventually learn to have joy, no matter how miserable your environment is. But it takes more work. So it's a series of evolutionary development. But everyone who is busily determined to be miserable today and succeeding is eventually evolving to a point where they are busily determined to be happy and succeeding equally well. But climbing the bell curve of human states is that last step. First, I matter. Second, I have control. Third, I learn to use that control to steadily climb the state. Where's the end game? Conscious, sustainable fun, for no other reason that it's more fun to have fun than it is not to have fun. And fun is fun. Conscious, sustainable fun is the pinnacle. I want a more loving world. Why? Because it's fun. I want to be more powerful. Why? Because it's more fun to be powerful than powerless. I want to have more friends because it's more fun to be popular than to be lonely. I want to have more sustainable fun. And I'm going to do what it takes to get there. Get power, get knowledge, dress the right clothes, to be complimented, whatever it is, that's what I want. To feel sustainably better. I want to be free so that I can be powerful. So that I have agency, so that I can have more fun. I can't have fun if I have no power. I just have to wait till fun comes and goes. And so there's a process around this. So it's moving towards fun. Mathematically, hierarchically, inevitably, sustainably, through death, through pain, through fear, through growth, through mattering, through trauma, through consciousness, through fun, through evolution, through diversity, through synergy, through chance. No matter what path you go on, you decide to be completely and utterly selfish. It's all about me, right? So of course I've got to have a great body, right? Because I'm selfish. I want the best for me. So I'm going to have a great body. I've got to eat healthy food because I'm number one. Now, I want the food that's healthy to be organic because that's better for me because I'm number one. Now, I want to be able to eat organic food anywhere. I want to be able to travel anywhere. So I need all kinds of transportation to exist. I want to be able to buy millions of different items. So the entire marketplace has to exist sustainably because I don't want anyone to be out of an item. So we have to have a high technological age. The whole planet needs to be organic so that I can eat anywhere and travel anywhere and care for my body. I want beauty, I want diversity, I want Indian food, Mexican food, Chinese food. I want this food. I want that food. I want ancient grains. I want this. I want every music imaginable to exist so that I can rummage through and decide what I like. And I want people to smile at me because it feels good and I'm important. And so the only way, and I don't want fake smiles, so the only way that people can smile authentically is to be happy. So I want everyone to be happy so that I can be around happy people. Because it's easier to be happy around happy people than it is to be happy around miserable and hostile people. So I don't want anyone to be hostile. You see, and the reason people are hostile is because they're abused as a child and bullied as an adolescent, lied to as an adult, sexually abused by their priests and this. They become incredibly hostile. They hate themselves and then they hate everyone else in the world. So I've got to eliminate all childhood abuse because I don't want to see people sulking. It makes me, I don't like it. No one can be abused as a child, which means I have to invent an education system that stops all sexual abuse. It means we have to have better social workers so that people are happy because I'm number one. Don't you get it? It's all about me. I want the world to be sustainable. I want it to be growing. I want it to keep changing. I don't want the same boring stuff as I saw last year. I want new movies to be made. So I want beautiful movie stars, and I want great script writers. I want everyone to have a great education. I want everyone to be rich so that they can hand me things. I don't want to have to carry money around. I want everyone handing me things right and left. Could we just have a happy, sustainable, organic, thriving economy? And I don't like wars. How do you think I feel walking around at my tourist destination and a grenade goes off, shattering my nerves? Outrageous. I'm selfish. No wars. So we need to develop psychological literacy, trauma literacy. It's all about me. Could the entire world just please be happy, sustainable, peaceful, alive, interesting? And if other people are enjoying themselves, for them to give me this experience is fine. Wonderful, do so. It's all for me, but the entire world has to be magnificent so that I can enjoy myself. Well, there's no difference in the extremes. Same is true with selflessness. Don't you want the exact same thing? The entire world to be happy? To have a great body so that other people can enjoy looking at your body, or your lover can enjoy being touched by your body? Complete selflessness and complete selfishness are the same. All opposites lead to one another. So if you do head off in the direction of extremism, and you follow it diligently, no dilettante here, discipline in your extremism. If you follow anything with extreme dedication and integrity, you will end up in its opposite, and the circle will be complete and you will be free. Having understood both poles, because you've lived them, and being able to create a third alternative, a synergy out of those two poles. It's just dilettantes, lazy, incompetent, unscientific people who talk about platitudes but then don't live them extremely enough to understand that they lead to the opposite, that live mediocre lives, that talk about giving while they're secretly very greedy, so they never experience the selflessness of giving or the selfishness of receiving, or the selflessness of receiving and the selfishness of giving. I love giving. I just gave a beautiful radio-controlled boat to the neighbor. I enjoyed it immensely. It's out of my garage. 2 kids are very happy. I have 2 kids very happy. I want to see what they're doing. It's all about me, right? I'm happy giving to them. They were so kind as to receive it with gratitude, wonder, and anticipation. What's more selfish? What's more selfless? They come together. So the paths of extremes come together. Now you also have patterns, right? And going to the forgiveness and completing that process there, what you cannot forgive, you create. What you create, you become. What you cannot forgive, you become. One of the interesting statistics is that if you have been molested as a child, we got off on that tangent, you are statistically higher in your likelihood to molest your children. If you've been sexually abused, you are statistically more likely to A, be sexually abused again, and B, to sexually abuse your children or other helpless people. And the process of not being able to forgive a heinous act, a trauma, is, first of all, we cannot forgive out there. The energy that we build up blocking and isolating something out there is mirrored by blocking the probability field, because there is a connection, often a very strong connection, between a victim and a perpetrator. If it didn't and wasn't conscious before, it often is after the event. Stockholm syndrome, falling in love with your captor, is an extreme case of that. But there is a strong connection between the victim and perpetrator, and one of the reasons is mirror neurons. To feel in control, we have to be able to predict other people's behavior. In order to predict other people's behavior, we have mirror neurons, which go out into the other person, try to understand what it's like to be them, and a certain part of our brain mirrors the other person as we understand them. So every victim who's been violated, in order to gain a sense of control, will try and understand why their violator is violating them. What's it like? Why are you doing this to me? What's going on? Why are you doing this? Why? Is the cry of every victim. And the mirror neurons do their best to develop a pattern that answers that question by becoming the abuser. Now, the victim now has 2 identities. The abuser that is in their brain through mirror neurons, and the victim that they are in their body being abused. So they have 2 identities. Now, while they're being abused, their victim identity is being decimated, shattered, weakened by a superior mass, by a larger object. A petite woman with 5 guys, a child bullied by an older sibling, a child whipped by his parents. The ego has to decide, which is me? Am I the abuser that I understand through mirror neurons, or am I the victim? Well, the victim feels terrible. I'm in pain, I'm helpless, I'm being hated. I don't want anything to do with me, the victim. I hate me, the victim. Well, the antithesis of the victim is the abuser identity that is crystallizing in mirror neurons. Now, the abuser identity has agency and power, which is a step up above the victim identity. So what many children and abuse survivors do is they identify with the pleasure of power over the victim, meaning they feel themselves in the body of the person who's beating them, who's raping them. And they understand the pleasure of power Because that's usually what's being medicated, is extreme powerlessness. Violence is a symptom of failure, a low level of intelligence, a symptom of helplessness, a symptom of incompetence, because you're having to spend physical energy, the most dense form of energy imaginable, to change your emotional state. So what it means is you have no psychological agency. You feel so powerless that the only way to change that around is to put a gun to someone else and watch them feel it. Oh, finally, I can be on the outside of my feelings. I can watch someone else feel what I feel all the time and can't change, and nobody will help me. Oh, this feels good. Wonderful. I'm in control. Finally, not of my own feelings directly, but I can focus on yours. So the victim who's going through this understands the relief, the pleasure, the satisfaction of the perpetrator. They may also understand the guilt, the horror, the self-loathing, etc., because many perpetrators were victims. So they understand what they're doing at some level, but it's the only way that they can get a control of their helplessness. So the bottom line is that many victims, unable to forgive themselves for their helplessness, identify primarily as the perpetrator in the perception that the perpetrator is superior because the perpetrator has agency. Every bullied child has a fantasy. When I grow up, I'm going to be bigger than them. I'm going to kick their butts. I'm going to rub this in their noses. I'm going to steal their lunch money. Fucking assholes. So, one of the interesting correlations, for example, with some of the boys who were molested by Catholic priests, they became very buff, worked out at the gym, this and that and the other. Some of the people who had, memories erupt, often in horrific ways, learning about and recalling in the media of these events, went from these very confident, denied, and this never happened to me, I'm strong, nobody can mess with me, blocking out that memory because it destroys agency. But they counteract it. I'm going to be a super jock. I'm going to be struck. I'm going to be a firefighter. I'm going to work out. I'm going to run. I'm going to do this. No one's going to see the terrified, helpless little boy in me. They're going to see the person who disowns that, who doesn't remember that, who's the opposite of that. And I'm going to be, if this is going to happen, I'm going to be on the perpetrator side. And in a psychologically illiterate culture, what happens is that the person who's the victim memories are surfacing, but they hate the victim because it reminds them of they're helpless, because they couldn't be there, they couldn't be enough for themselves. So they push that down. They become the internal abuser, hating themselves. Well, whatever you do to yourself eventually goes out. It floods, it becomes too much to hold, and you've got to give it out. Then you become the perpetrator that you cannot forgive. So this is part of the forgiveness learning cycle. In an unconscious, reactive, sociopathic, and psychologically illiterate culture, there are many, many things that happen to us that we cannot forgive. Maybe we go numb, so we don't even admit that they happen. But if we do feel and really get what it felt like, those bastards, they did this to me, they're bad, I want them to pay, I want revenge, no forgiveness. Now this protocol goes on for a time. And it damages the person. The person who's being hated doesn't suddenly become a great person. They hide, they feel more fearful, more shame. Then they feel more helpless. And maybe they need to offend more secretly, perhaps, but they need to offend again. Person who can't forgive, I hate him, I'm going to shoot him, I'm going to kill him. Well, if they do kill him and whatever, many of them then feel guilt. I'm a horrible person. I can't forgive myself and them, so you deteriorate. Now I'm not watering myself. Now I'm poisoning my own garden with salt. So I deteriorate, and we deteriorate into what we're fixated on, that which we will not forgive, will not allow, will not acknowledge, will not talk about. So we become our abusers if we cannot forgive them. It's just a series of mathematical forces that bring that about. Now, it doesn't have to be the same way. For example, my mother made me feel completely small and inadequate as a child, so I decided I'm not going to have children, right? Because I don't want to do that to some helpless child. Just so hard to deal with, and I watched my siblings doing that to their children and my parents doing it to all of the children, and just like this viral path. I don't know how to deal with this, but I'm not going to have children, right? But I have a business, and guess what? I make my employees and my wife feel as small and insignificant and helpless as I felt at 6 years old from time to time. So I'm really smart, right? Those horrible parents, I can't forgive them. I can't even feel the pain. It's so numb. But I'm not going to have children. I'm not going to do that to someone else, because I know I'm capable of it. So what am I going to do? Shoot myself? So the core pattern that gets transferred, I haven't whipped any of my employees with belts the way I was whipped. I haven't hit any of my employees or wife with sticks the way I was hit. But my mother and father left me feeling completely and utterly worthless and helpless and alone regularly and traumatically. And I see that look after a particularly impatient line of criticizing. You did this wrong and don't interrupt me, and now you did this and now you know that's not right. Do it like this. Suddenly, they're like 6-year-old children. Can't do it right. Can't be good enough for mom and dad. I hate those parents for doing this to me. But that which we cannot forgive becomes the gravitational pull, the attachment, the charge, the determination becomes the gravitational pull to what we must pass through by becoming. So now I'm the abuser, and I hate myself, and I can't forgive myself. But there's progress, because the sociopathic pretense of they're the villain, those bastards, they did that to a child. How could they? And me, of all people. I'm not like that. I'm not so horrible. They're disgusting. They disgust me, right? That's out there. You can't change or learn about something that's out there. Their problem. I'm not to blame. I was 6 years old. See, every child is a victim. Every adolescent is a perpetrator. And it's progress, right? I'm going to be on top. It's the adult that breaks the cycle. And the definition of an adult is someone who loves. That's what an adult is. That's how you become an adult. By loving and accepting your child and loving and accepting your adolescent. By loving and accepting your victim and loving and accepting your perpetrator. That's how you become an adult. Once you've loved your own victim and perpetrator and understood the connection between the victim and perpetrator, which is often strong in statistical terms.